There we go. Let's see here. Make sure that everything continues to generate correctly. No errors. Nice. Means backup's full. Oh! Alrighty. Now, there's a subject that I've wanted to touch on for quite some time. And of all the subjects that I'll touch on, this is probably one of the more difficult. Because it requires a lot of explanation. What it boils down to is a very, very special title that I got quite legitimately one day, and I still hold. Although you could say that it means little, I find symbolic meaning in it. That title is King. Now, as you probably well understand, it would take an awful lot of hubris to even claim such a thing. And yes, I won't argue. That would be reasonable to think. Now, the special thing about the title of King is now, this was even explained to me at the point in time, is that you can't just get that. That's a title that's given by God himself personally. You can't ask for that. And now as for the day, that it happened on, real simple day, like any other. Now, I was raised Roman Catholic, and one of the sacraments in the church is called confirmation. You pick a saint which you feel, if not emulates your life best, then at least that you look to live up to in your life. Many of my more controversial friends would pick things like Mother Teresa, which of course was controversial at the point in time because although the Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodoxy, I believe it's called, would be fine with the idea of a living saint, Roman Catholics most certainly would not be okay with that. Or at least not at the point in time that I was there. Things have potentially changed since then, and there's at least a series of popes that I've not been too fond with towards. Now, as for the idea of whether or not I believe in God, I've lied plenty of times. Because it didn't matter at those points. And said, no, absolutely not. Why would I? Why would any thinking person? There's no reason to. And then I go and look at it, and it's like, well, just like with those rules I said that I saw you all following, so too, actions speak much louder than words. And there's been several times, a good few of them, where I've looked into the future immediately while someone was asking me, do you believe in God? And of the immediate futures that I saw, one of them was me getting shot. And I wanted to make sure that the punchline went through, which was, I'm going to send you to him. Bang. That way I could go out with a laugh. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds unbelievable. That's fine. But that is how it is. Oops. How do I get out of here? So, actions speak louder than words, and when push came to shove, and my mind was telling me, what do you truly believe? The answer was yes. Yes, absolutely. I've always behaved as though I believe in at least a god. I've even had quite a few friends who didn't necessarily need just one god, but, enjoyed the benefit of multiple. And I kid you not when I say that they looked at the Greek and Roman pantheons and said, yes, these are accurate representations of, things forces that still exist to this day. At the point in time, I didn't fully understand, but I think I've come to understand what he was meaning more. Although I really can't say that I'm smart enough to say that I could truly get it and figure out just how deep he was getting at. Because he was definitely one of those mystical types. And I mean that in the best of ways. Let's see here, where did I start planting over there? Oh, right there. Now, of course, when I was back in, oh, what would they call it? Would they call it religious education classes? Basically the classes that you go through on the way to confirmation. They would remind us that, you can't pick a living saint like Mother Teresa, and in my case, you can't pick King David for two reasons. You can't ask for the title of king. Maybe David, but David isn't even a saint. And it's like, well, neither am I. Those were words that just came to me at that point in time. I still remember it to this day, so I'm almost positive that those words weren't even mine, but they were, the ones I was supposed to speak. Almost like playing a part. And all to the same, many times I've found myself since then more or less acting out the part of king. Several times with a good number of my friends back in the day when they were all living with me. No one truly had a job except for me, which meant that I was the only one actually making sure that everyone was staying alive. And yes, it did take its toll on me, and eventually had some seriously negative consequences, especially when I found myself suddenly alone, after being so very unalone for so long. What would they say? Even bad company is better than no company? I don't know who would say that, probably crazy people, right? But all to the same, it's a part that I even played out with you all at a point in time. And I don't necessarily mean with Prototech, the point in time where I would more or less intentionally fly off of the handle because people needed for a point to be made, and I'd go ahead and step forward and, take the responsibility of being the one to embarrass himself in the process of saying or doing something somewhat regrettable. And a lot of the times, yes, I looked forward to the points where I would have a good few numbers of my friends, like 0x or somebody else, able to kind of step in and more or less save my target from me. Wow, that is hardcore loud music. But I mean, the point in time where the old original TMC first started. I played out the part of your Marduk. A few of you do not know who that is. It's the old Mesopotamian god. And his qualities would have been that he has eyes all the way around his head and speaks magic words. And what is meant by that is that the eyes of the king, I guess the good representation of that would be, what, Zazu from the Lion King? The little bird? The eyes of the king, whether used or not, are always available. It doesn't necessarily take a king to use the eyes, and even though someone may be king, it doesn't mean that they'll make use of it properly. As seen with Scar, where he did little more but torment the eyes of the king by making him gaze upon what he had done to the once glorious kingdom, etc., etc. There were many points where you would need for, this portion and that portion of perhaps policies, perhaps inventions and machines, where you would need the best of everyone's stuff brought together, and you would need someone who would just be able to do it. For example, take the sand generator. There was a point in time where, who was it who had done it so well? It was Chorus Crowd. They had taken the upper end off of Mangoes and the lower end off of Ray's and put them together into a single machine that was better than either of the previous machines put together. I absolutely loved what I had seen, and because I had seen it once or twice, later on, when someone, I forget who even, asked, does anyone have it, and then described it, I let them know that yes, I had seen it, and that, I had not only been thinking about sand generators in general, but I'm pretty sure that I could put that together in less than an hour. And I don't remember if I necessarily pulled off less than an hour. I mean, I'm slow as can be, and even when I'm connected to the internet, I'm not necessarily any faster. But all to the same, they needed the best of everything they had at the moment taken apart and put together by somebody who could at least swallow their pride enough to accept that they invented nothing, but just put together a machine on demand. And all to the same, there were quite a few times where we played out other parts of, the Marduk tradition. You would ritualistically bring me outside of the city gates, strip me naked, and humiliate me with a broomstick before having me recant all of the ways in which I'd failed, and then you'd forgive me and we'd go back and basically have a party. Which lines up exactly with the way that the old Mesopotamians would have done it with their Marduk. Am I saying this to inflate my ego? Perhaps. Why would I lie? Perhaps. But more to paint a clear picture. That more than once, I'd taken on the title simply because it needed to be taken. At that point in time, I remember telling, my superiors, basically, that I had no more flocks to tend, there were no more Goliath to slay. It was time for me to be king. And although quite a few people argued with me vehemently, just like I'm pretty sure that quite a few people would tell me that my hubris has been one of my greatest flaws through the entire time that they've known me. I mean, for example, how could I believe for even a moment that I could unify all of the technical community simply by utilizing a tool that was in the process of being created? I guess in the end, that dream would be ended kind of by a combination of both me and Ita. We came to an impasse where we simply could not agree with each other, and we ended up tearing out the heart of the technical community in the process of our breakup. And yes, just like breaking up with my wife and leaving her behind, it hurts me terribly to know that I don't have him anymore. He was absolutely wonderful to hang around. We we complemented each other perfectly. He was all of the serious that you could ever want, all of the brains and knowledge that you could possibly hope for. And then what I would bring to the party, since I had it, was a cheerful enough attitude to help encourage people that, no, I genuinely want to see what you build. No, none of my machines are ever supposed to be an endpoint. They're supposed to be a learning aid, just one more pattern in the process. And I've always been a strong believer in one idea that I've never quite seen anywhere outside of myself, I think. And that's the idea that all patterns, every song, every picture, every painting, every movie, every story, every pattern that could possibly be predicted or invented, has long since existed. Whatever, for example, the cure to cancer might be, is probably something which has been easily able to achieve for the last 200 years if only we knew specifically what we were doing. Of course, I don't want to say too awful much about the pharmaceutical industry, because if I go saying that it's mostly just trial and error, and that most of the time when you're trying to invent a headache medicine, you end up usually inventing anything but a headache medicine, that might make it seem like I have some degree of knowledge, and I wouldn't want to fool anyone. But I have seen, one question asked, that's relevant to this, at least slightly. And that's, if you're so butthurt about Prototech, about what happened, why don't you just make your own server? And the answer is actually simpler than I thought it would be. I'm afraid. Genuinely. Before I had the courage to trust people. I don't necessarily anymore. I wouldn't trust that anyone would be able to follow my rules. I don't trust that I wouldn't get kicked. I don't trust that any of my builds would be preserved. I don't trust that any of my, hard-standing decisions would be respected. It really is fear. I'm just afraid, that's all. I saw how bad things could go once. I don't want it to happen again. I'll do the same. Why don't I start dating again? Because, I didn't see just how it went bad once. I saw how it went bad time and time again in very startlingly similar ways. similar enough to where I was asking myself if there was something wrong with me before finally coming to the understanding that I kept ending up in situations with the exact same type of people. Now, what's that mean for me? I don't know. I haven't finished thinking. I haven't finished dreaming. Most of this has come to me in the dream. All too similarly, most of my choices and actions these days are usually based off of, my visions of the future, which are usually a few milliseconds in the future. Just enough of a warning for me to, step back before somebody starts getting ready to swing. Not enough time to do anything useful. Just enough time to step out of the way. That's all. Oh, when do most of these happen? A great number of them happen when I'm staring somebody down who I've decided I don't care if they die. Well, that's rather harsh, yes, I know. But sometimes, keep in mind, what if somebody's trying to play the knockout game with your grandfather? If your grandfather turned and decked him and he ended up hitting his head on the curb and started twitching in funny ways, you wouldn't call your grandfather a murderer. You'd say that that asshole got what he had coming to him. The asshole on the ground. He was about to go and do that to my grandfather? He deserved that. Or, he was about to do that to me? He deserved that. Or, hey, he was just about to do that to a random stranger? Guess what? He got what he had coming to him. And yes, that is a problem around here. Just as you would expect it to be. Actually, I don't necessarily know. From what I hear, most of you actually live in relatively soft areas. You don't have any of the experiences that I've got. Like, I don't think a single one of you has been in a knife fight, right? And I'm not encouraging any of you to go and get yourself into a knife fight, because it's a guaranteed way to end up with really bad scars or end up losing a whole bunch of blood. Organs don't regrow. They only mend to a small degree. Ah, yes. Let me find more analogs. I remember also. Very good friend of mine. He and I played out the story of Moses. They weren't Israelites, but a bunch of I would say a bunch of grumbling Israelites, but perhaps they once considered themselves slaves? Or at least a few of them were willing to go and say that they had had a slave-like existence, basically being forced to dig for no point. Maybe that was all jokes, but sometimes even in jokes, little bits of truth come through. So, my party of, freed yet grumbling slaves, under my care, went off into the desert one day. For a great long time, felt like 40 years, we witnessed many things, one of which was, of course, what did we call it? The swarm. The villager swarm. But yes, we watched them assemble for the swarm. And that was definitely enjoyable. I don't think that there's more than, like, 3 people who know about that. Maybe 6. You might even say that my brother and I played out a few biblical stories at times. For example, the story of Cain and Abel almost happened more than once between the two of us. And all I can say is thank God that neither of us died. Because if he had died, it really would have been a perfect analog to Cain and Abel, because then it really would have been the better of us, the best of us, who was gone. Someday I'll go into detail about him. His stories are rather interesting. He's probably the best mechanic that anyone could find. Especially given that, I'll leave his story for later. You'll like that. What would you say? A king without a kingdom. At least I have a prison. And a task. A very large task. And what I can say about my task? Even though it's not going fast, it's extremely enjoyable, and it gives me a lot of time to think about my next task. It makes it to where I'm not just running out of things to do, as I knew that you don't necessarily enjoy finishing everything. You don't enjoy finishing anything at all. That's the worst part when you've finished, which is one of the reasons why I think it was long before I met all of you. I never aimed for perfection, only chased.